So let's just touch on Botswana. Of course, we are waiting for that MPC rate decision to come through. Also, just looking at what we've been seeing from a GDP perspective, we actually saw the economy contracting. That was a bit of a concern. So give us the context in which the Botswana economy stands right now. It seems that we might just see a bit of pressure on the growth front, but inflation seemingly pretty much stable.
That's correct. GDP last year, the mining sector disappointed with low growth, and the star of the show was really the non-mining sector, which expanded by something like 7.8% year on year. And also, as you mentioned, in the first quarter of this year, the mining sector disappointed. Mining is about 30% of GDP, and obviously non-mining the rest. So there is some concern about on the growth front. On the inflation front, I think the expectation is that inflation could ease. If you look at the two core inflation measures, they are both down. And also the headline inflation measures, I think, sitting at about 8% in March from 8.8% in January. So there is some benign outlook for the inflation numbers. The MPC, I think, which is probably meeting today. There's been no announcement as yet. So I think they would certainly consider the inflation outlook, which they expect would fall to within the 3 to 6 inflation band by the middle of this year. And they would also consider, of course, the slightly disappointing GDP growth. The other factor, needless to say, would be global growth concerns, especially with the diamond sector, where the United States was the prime buyer. It still is the prime buyer, but I think on the margin, China and India and also the Middle East buyers are also beginning to play a more substantial role in demand. As we know, the Eurozone is probably contracting. China's growth has been written down to some extent, so demand from those areas will also be low. And I think NBC will consider those.
Of course, and I mean, if we could just look, and you mentioned the growth scenario for the fourth quarter. If I look at those numbers, 5.8% quarter-on-quarter contraction is what we saw. But let's look at it on the year-on-year basis, where we saw it expanding by 1.4%. It's still relatively benign. I mean, we're not looking at fantastic growth rate levels here, but we are waiting for that first quarter number to come through, Jan. And what kind of growth are you expecting to come through for the first 3 months of 2012?
My expectation is it will be relatively lackluster. If you simply look at diamond prices, and there are two that you can look at, is the Antwerp Diamond Index published by the Bank of Botswana itself, and you also get polished diamond prices. Both of them have eased during the first quarter of this year. Now, of course, growth is a volume story, not just a price story. But if you read from the prices that there is probably a weakening demand for diamonds. So that may not continue for the rest of the year if global growth does start to pick up towards the end of the year and into the next year.
Okay, so let's delve into Namibia, because we saw that MPC rate decision coming through yesterday. Rates unchanged, sitting at 6%, but inflation sitting up at around 12.1%. No, in fact, that's the wrong number that I'm talking of, but we've actually got a better inflation scenario that is playing out, Jan. What is your view with regards to the Namibian economy? And it's very much linked to what we see here in South Africa.
That's right. The two economies are related. On the inflation front, research have shown something like 60% of Namibia's inflation is imported from South Africa. That makes sense because Namibia imports a lot of goods and services from South Africa. So over time, generally, Namibia's inflation is marginally higher than South Africa's. So I expect about 6.4% for Namibia this year. I think on the growth side, that I think is quite a big unknown. There's the much discussed oil discovery offshore Namibia's coast. Whether that will actually yield any oil is still needs to be confirmed. But if there's a substantial oil discovery, of course it will alter the entire Namibian economic and social landscape.
I'd like to also touch on what we've seen coming through in Malawi, Jan, and it's been quite interesting because we've heard a lot of reports that the new president, Joyce Banda, has now asked the central bank governor to resign and then putting a new person in. Of course, that information is still not confirmed as yet, but we're seeing a lot of things that are being changed on the ground, and that's to ensure that foreign direct investment comes to the fore and also that aid continues, because aid makes such a big portion of the overall economy. What is your view on Malawi?
I think there's going to be substantial changes. I believe, well, I'm guessing that the first thing that needs to happen is that Malawi will need to mend its relationship with not only the IMF but also with the donor countries like the United Kingdom. I think what will happen is that the IMF will put in place a support package. Part of that, as they've insisted for a long time, is that there must be a more market clearing and market related exchange rate, and that is going to be the big question that needs to be answered. I don't expect there's going to be sort of a sudden death devaluation. I expect it will be a more gradual one. The numbers that I've got is something like from 165 currently to about 200 by the middle of the year, and maybe 250 at the beginning of next year. The reason for that is if you have a massive devaluation, inflation will go up to double, or even double-digit levels, which will be very problematic.